Here we go. All right. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you. So, hi everyone. I'm Shawn. I live just outside Ottawa, Canada. So just north of Rochester. Been down your way several times for WordCamp over the years, and always liked speaking with your community. So, Michelle, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
During the day, I'm the director of engineering and security at a SaaS company called Actionable. Our platform there is all written in Laravel, so another PHP framework. But we do our marketing sites in WordPress. On the side, I'm also a freelance developer, code reviewer, and web host. I've been a WordPress Core contributor and plugin author, as well as an organizer and speaker at WordCamps, including WordCamp Ottawa, and on the committee that is looking at putting together WordCamp Canada, our first national camp here. Hoping to have some news about that soon. And I've spoken at WordPress events in Canada, the US, and Australia. You can find me, my blog and email newsletter at shawnhooper.ca, or you can find me on Mastodon. So that's a little bit about me. And now on to what we're going to cover tonight. So what do we mean by security? So a couple of definitions of what we're talking about. Is WordPress secure? Always the big question. And then some recommendations for users, some recommendations for developers, and I believe there's also some in there for web hosting or system administrators. So what do we mean when we're talking about security? You can get a pretty broad definition of everything that falls into this category. But what I like to look at is something called the CIA triad. This is something you'll see a lot in different, in anyone who talks about security, is everything fits into one of these three. The C being confidentiality, protecting the information that you have on your website from unauthorized access. Integrity, which is the data that's in your website trustworthy? Is it complete? Has it not been accidentally altered or modified by someone else that wasn't supposed to do it? And finally, availability. Is the data on your website, or is your website accessible when people need it to be? Is it, and so is it available? Can they get to the information on your site? So that's really what we're talking about why we care about security, and what we're talking about when it comes to security of your website. Does that make sense, everyone? Any questions?
So far, so good.
Okay. So then we could look at what kind of attacks there can be that can affect that confidentiality, integrity, or availability of your website. So there are backdoor attacks. This is where someone is able to get code running on your WordPress site that allows them to bypass the login system on your website and get them into your dashboard or into your database, where they can then go and cause harm. Whether that's reading data they're not supposed to see, whether it's posting new data on your site, that's used for various purposes, or whether it's deleting data. You don't want someone in there with a backdoor. Brute force attacks. This is where someone attempts to gain access through your login page by trying as many passwords as they can until they happen to get the right one. So obviously want to avoid those. Redirect attacks, where code gets run when someone visits your website that sends them somewhere else, so you don't end up getting the traffic in the end. Cross-site scripting is a type of attack where the attacker is attempting to get JavaScript to run on your user's browser. That wasn't part of the code that you intended to run. Cross-site scripting attacks are often created by forms that aren't handled correctly, and then would display that JavaScript and have it execute. And it runs on the user's computer. And finally, a denial of service attack, which would be to flood your site with so much traffic that it crashes and isn't available for users who, legitimately want to go to the website. And so if you look at each one of those types of attacks, you can map those to the CIA triad that we just spoke about. Backdoors. Confidentiality is gone if they're into your dashboard. Integrity could be gone as well because they've now got access to change all the data in through admin. And availability, they could delete data, so it no longer becomes available. Brute force, same thing. Redirects, that would be availability because they're not able to get to your data, right? They're being redirected somewhere else. Your data is then not available. Cross-site scripting could be availability, could be integrity, that could be all of them. Denial of services is availability, right? So you start to see how those map across to those key items in the triad. Now, when we go into looking at WordPress specifically, I'm going to start off with the statement, WordPress is secure. You will hear a lot of people out there say, oh, WordPress isn't secure, it's full of bugs, it's hacked all the time. While sometimes that is true, it's not WordPress itself that is buggy. The core of WordPress is reviewed by many hundreds of developers in a release, dozens looking at changes to code. And there's a dedicated security team that is working to fix issues in WordPress. There are bug bounty programs. We'll talk about those later. WordPress core itself, when you install it, and if it's installed properly, is very secure. The risk in WordPress lies in things like bad server configuration, plugins that have security issues in them, themes that have security issues in them, or bad user practices, something like using weak passwords. The reason why so many people associate WordPress with being hackable is that it has 62% market share of CMSs in use, according to W3 Techs. So with that kind of market share, it's a huge target for attackers. It really allows them to take the same script and run it against thousands of websites all running WordPress and try and find known vulnerabilities, which is why we see so many attempts for hacking. I also want to address the feeling that a lot of website owners have of, well, I'm never going to be hacked. My website's not big enough to be hacked. This is some hobby project I have, run a little mom and pop shop. Nobody wants to hack me. I'm not a government. I'm not a big corporation. The truth is, you are likely to get hacked if you don't pay attention to your security, and not because you yourself are a target. It's not directed at you. You don't have a foreign government going, oh, I want to get into this blog's admin dashboard. What you're getting a lot of is scripts that have been written with a known vulnerability in them that can be exploited. And this script is just going over every website it can find and attempting to use now what is known as a way to get into a site and see if it can do that with you. And it just goes over thousands and thousands of websites until it finds a victim. It's not necessarily a directed attack. So if you have a website this applies to you, is the point of that. So what can we do about this? We're going to look at how to secure WordPress as a user, a system server administrator, a developer, and as an information security professional, what we can do. We'll start it with the user's perspective. First of all, choose wisely. The largest source of problems in WordPress come from the theme and plugin ecosystem. So there are certain things that I would do. Namely, I would start with plugins that are on the WordPress repository on WordPress.org. Those plugins have been reviewed by someone on the plugin team. This is not to say that they're bug-free, but they are at least scanned to make sure that they're not doing anything they shouldn't be. They're not stealing your data and sending it off somewhere, or something else nefarious like that. Or choose commercial plugins that are well reviewed from companies that are, well known in the WordPress space, that provide good support, things like that. If you're getting the plugin out of WordPress.org, I like looking at things like, is the plugin regularly maintained? You can look in the metadata for the plugin that's shown on the plugin page when it was last updated. If it hasn't been updated in years, or hasn't been tested with current versions of WordPress, I would shy away from that plugin. I would look at the plugin support page on WordPress.org and see if the author is replying to support tickets, or are they sitting there open, with months or years of no replies. If you see a plugin not getting responses, there's a good chance that the author also isn't paying attention to security issues with that plugin, or has maybe abandoned the plugin entirely. And so I would, again, shy away from using that kind of plugin. And also look if the plugin's popular. That's not a great security metric, but it does tell you that a lot of people are using it. And if there were major known issues with the plugin, they would start to be surfaced. Where a new plugin or a plugin that is not as popular just hasn't run in as many different environments under different conditions that could have some bugs arise. So here's from the WordPress.org. You can see that this plugin was last updated 2 months ago. Tested up to, this is an old screenshot, but in the screenshot it was tested up to version 4.9.4. You can see what, it requires 5.2.4 of PHP. So, it's probably not using the latest and greatest in terms of PHP. Tested version, if that was the current tested to you, okay, they're testing their plugins when a new release comes out. And then looking in the support forums, you can see when the last support tickets were created. You can see if there's replies. So very quickly, I can judge whether this plugin, passes kind of just a smell test of are there any major problems here in terms of the plugin being kept up to date. Next thing is keep everything you have updated. So WordPress Core itself, obviously when it comes out with new features and bug fixes and stuff to WordPress, you want to keep it updated. By default, your WordPress site will update any minor version updates that are released. So when you see version, let's say 4.6.1, that is a minor update, that third number of the 0.1. Going up to 0.2 or going up to 0.3, those are minor updates. And so by default, those will automatically get installed on your site. You want to keep all of your plugins up to date, whether those are plugins from WordPress.org, from a a commercial plugin that you've purchased, or custom code that you have had written. You want to make sure that stuff is always kept up to date. For the .org plugins and most of the commercial ones, those can be updated from within the dashboard. Automatic updates are available, but are not turned on by default for the .org plugin, and you can choose to turn those on plugin by plugin. So if there's some plugins that you trust that every time you've updated it, it hasn't been a problem, you can turn on auto updates. You could leave other ones off so that they stay at the version that they are. My recommendation here is, the more important the site is to you and to have available all the time, the riskier automatic updates are, because something could update, break your site, and you're in bed and you don't get a notice that your site's down or something. But like on my personal blog, I have the updates all just turned on. That way I don't have to worry about it. It's always going to be updated. If it does happen to go down, that sucks, but it's not a huge deal. It's not my e-commerce site for work going down and nobody can get to their cart. So you can choose what level of update you think is appropriate for your site.
I have a question for you, or kind of a statement, a question or / question. I think that in the WordPress ecosystem itself, there's some confusion about what managed WordPress hosting will do versus what managed WordPress hosting doesn't do. And I think sometimes people err on the side of expecting that your host is going to update your plugins and things like that, which is generally speaking not true. However, a lot of hosts will update your major versions of WordPress itself. So keep an eye when those kinds of things come through. If you do see updates that need to be made, don't expect somebody else to make them for you.
Absolutely. Like, pay attention to the little orange circles on your WordPress, in your admin dashboard. Exactly. If it says there's updates, like this screenshot right here, you can see in the sidebar, those little circles. Next updates tells me that there's updates needed. Even if you're on a managed host, go run those updates yourself. Very good point, Michelle.
Just wanted to make sure people aren't expecting it's just going to magically happen.
Exactly. So keep everything up to date. And then finally, your themes was the last one. If you have themes downloaded from the repository and the themes updated, you can also get that latest update through your WordPress dashboard. Next thing to do, have backups. This is important part of a security talk, because without backups, you can't do restores when you are hacked. And I'm saying when there very specifically, because you want to be ready for when that happens. So you want to back up WordPress Core, all the plugins you have, all your themes, the media library, so your uploads folder, and the database that has all of your posts in it and other information. To do this, no, I haven't updated this slide in a while. I don't know if this is still correct pricing or anything, but you could use Backup Buddy, Updraft Plus.
So Backup Buddy isn't Backup Buddy anymore. It's Solid Backups. So I just put the link.
Right, it was renamed.
Yep, Solid WP. iThemes is now Solid WP, so you can get a lot of information there for backups and security.
Perfect. Updraft Plus and VaultPress were the three backup plugins that I used to use, at least. Updraft Plus is still the one that I like, in that it allows you to back up to Dropboxes or to Amazon S3 or Google Drive, different locations like that, which of course brings up the just like the statement of make sure that your backups are being stored somewhere other than on the server that you're doing the backup on. A lot of these plugins will allow you to do a backup and save it into your WP content folder. That is great for being able to go back and undo changes that you made accidentally if you deleted content on your site or something. It really doesn't help you when your site has been hacked and that backup file might have been deleted or modified, or when the hard drive in the server that your site is hosted on crashes and the backup was on the same drive, you know, or the web host that you're hosting with goes out of business and you lose access to your site and you've lost your backup too. So you want to make sure that backup is stored somewhere else. And I like doing that either to Amazon S3 or Dropbox or something like that. This next one is a bit of a debated issue in the WordPress world as to whether or not your WordPress login, that your username admin, should be changed. A lot of these scripts that I was talking about earlier do automatically, try to guess using the admin username because it's common, and that way they only have to brute force your password and not your username as well. But one kind of added security thing you can do is change that username to something else. It makes the hacking scripts have to guess your username and your password. But in reality, there are other ways in WordPress to get the list of usernames that are on the site, and those scripts can do that as well. So the username isn't really, it's not a protected piece of information. One interesting way of improving security there is to keep the admin account, but downgrade it to subscriber. And so essentially it becomes an account, user ID 1, user admin. It's the thing that all the scripts think is, they found the holy grail of hacking your website if they can get into that account. And then it doesn't actually have any permissions to do anything. And you create yourself a separate login under a different username and password that is your actual administrative account. It's kind of a neat little trick just to waste the scripts and the hackers' time and lessen the chance that they'll get into the site through that account. Of course, use secure passwords. Password 123 is not secure. Make sure you're using something more complicated. I recommend using password managers for everything, and to have your password manager generate a password and use that, or do something so that it's a password that isn't going to get cracked by a brute force attack. Trying dictionary words. I also recommend enabling two-factor authentication on your site. If you are hosted on WordPress.com, that is a feature available, in your dashboard there. If you have a WordPress.org, if you're self-hosted, I would look at this two-factor authentication plugin from David Anderson. It will create a two-factor solution on your WordPress site that requires that you enter a code from a application like Google Authenticator or Authy on your phone, where it will give you a 6-digit code to enter to get into the website. And so that helps prevent those brute force attacks where someone was able to get through your password screen, but they don't have your phone, so they can't authenticate into your dashboard. I like having everyone log in using email addresses personally. It's not really a security improvement, but I always use this plugin that switches the login to email instead of username. My only thing on that one was email addresses are longer and maybe a bit harder to guess at, and they're not in some of the code that is in some of the other ways you can retrieve usernames, like looking at the author username on posts. Having your email as that login is different, isn't the value that's shown as your username. So obfuscates it a little bit. Again, minor improvement here, but not a significant improvement. The principle of least privilege in security says only give users permissions to do the jobs they need to do. And so if you are a site that has multiple users, maybe everybody doesn't need to be an administrator. You can, really look at what role people have in running your website and give them only the access that they need to do their job. You can install, this is another old slide, I apologize, a security suite. So there are a couple of plugins that generally work to improve WordPress's security by doing things like limiting the number of logon attempts, monitoring files for being changed, enforcing some other kind of best practices. And so one of, these suites are good at giving you general coverage on a whole pile of things. Some of them have application firewalls in them now. And it does elevate security on your WordPress dashboard so that, you have something to see in terms of here's where my security posture stands and here's what I can do to improve it. Things like that. So they're good monitoring tools. Personally, I'm a fan of WordFence. It's the one that I'm using on my personal site. And I've been using it for several years and quite like it as a general security plugin. So as a user, that's really the things that you can do on your website. Those are all things that you can do in the WordPress dashboard to improve your security posture. Any questions at this point?
I put
Go.
oh, sorry, go.
No, carry on.
You go.
I was going to ask a question, right? You were mentioning backups, perform daily, weekly, monthly backups on Unix environments. I'm not sure how they do it on Windows, but what's recommended to go back? Because some of the DOS and other hacks these days could have been embedded months back.
Yeah. I tend to keep my backups 30 days usually on most sites, hoping that it would get caught within that window. If you have the storage space and wherever you're sending it to, storage is generally pretty cheap. You could keep that data for a lot longer. If you wanted to avoid, if you wanted to really try and make sure you had clean copies of everything. But there's also, you want to factor in how long back do I really want to go to a restore point? If the site truly was hacked a year ago and I'm running an e-commerce store, well, do I really want to restore my database back to losing a year's worth of orders? You probably wouldn't. You'd probably look at some other way of restoring your website to an unhacked version. So yeah, short answer, I tend to do 30 days.
Okay, thank you.
Emily had a question too. Emily?
Yeah, sorry. I had two questions. So I noticed on an older site I never added a nickname for the users, and somehow their usernames were found. So I wondered, does it matter having a nickname that's different than the username, or that's just an illusion? And then I wondered if you could talk about any disadvantages of those security suites.
Okay. So first of all, the nickname issue. Really, when it comes down to what the username is, usernames are fairly discoverable in WordPress, depending how things are configured. For example, the REST API, I believe, still shows usernames in the responses. So and in a lot of posts, you'll see the author's name in the URL. If you're looking for the author page, the author archive page would have that username. So I wouldn't worry too much about trying to secure that. I would focus in that case more on making sure that your users have strong passwords. About these security suites, the downside to them is that, first of all, there can be a bit of bloat. These suites do a lot of things. And so, they, can sometimes slow down the website a little bit, or just have more in it than you necessarily wanted. The other downside to them is that, for example, being a firewall. It's great that they have as much functionality there as they do, but really, when you're talking about firewalls, you want that done at a level that your web host is doing, ideally. Having it as a WordPress plugin is the second best option. So there are some things that these suites do that I would do other ways if I had those options available to me. But really, having one of those suites installed, it definitely can't hurt. They do a lot of good, and I do recommend them.
Thank you.
So I want to look next at your system or server configuration from the server administrator's perspective. And some of you may be able to do this for your own sites, and many of you are likely paying a web host to do this, or a consultant to do this for you, or you have a managed host. But it's nice to look at the things that can be done. Enabling HTTPS. Pretty standard these days, but it's amazing how many websites I still see that are HTTP only. And this means that the traffic between your site and your user is not being encrypted en route. And so, especially any website that has a form, where the user's entering any data to send to you, you want that HTTPS enabled. There's no reason these days not to do that. It used to be that you had to pay for security certificates and things like that to get HTTPS. Any good host now just includes it for free. And so make sure that you have that enabled on your site. When transferring files to your website, FTP was a protocol that was used. You'd use an FTP program to upload your files. You want to make sure you're using SFTP now, which is just like HTTP has HTTPS, FTP has SFTP. It's a encrypted connection, so that the data that you're transferring is secure while it's being transmitted between your computer and server. You want to make sure that the files and folders in WordPress have the right permissions. So directories having, these are Unix permission codes, 755, or the files are 644. The reason for setting file and directory permissions like this is to make sure that the server is able to execute the PHP that runs WordPress, but won't execute if a hacker uploads a random PHP file into the uploads folder, that won't run. It allows them to view your images, but not overwrite them. So it's just setting the permissions on what's allowed to be read, write, or execute in the WordPress directory structure. You can block some PHP code execution. So this is web server configuration code for a htaccess file that stops PHP from being executed, and if it's in the uploads folder, because that is often a hack that you see through a poorly managed plugin, or even just if someone gained access to media library and was able to upload a PHP file, they would then try and run it on your site, which could give could create a page maybe where they're just abusing your site as a phishing site, trying to get someone else's credentials, or they could be using it to execute code on your server to try and maybe export the contents of your database and download it. So it's nice to it's good to be able to block where PHP is executed. You can disable the file editor. So in the WordPress dashboard, there's editors for plugins and themes where you can go and actually edit the PHP code. Of course, if someone gets access to your dashboard that isn't supposed to be there, and then they can modify these files, they can cause all sorts of trouble. So disabling these features is also recommended. You can do that with adding the disallow file edit flag to the WP config file. Set that constant. Disabling XML RPC. This is a feature of WordPress that allowed communication between WordPress sites. The trackbacks and pingbacks feature use this, but it's also one that, if abused, can crash a site really quickly because it takes a lot of processing to run that file. I believe was the reason for it. So if you don't need it, turn it off. There are some plugins or some services that will need XML RPC, then you'll have to leave it on. But if you don't need it, that just reduces the another potential way of your site being attacked. Keep sites isolated. If you're running multiple sites on the same server, keep them in separate home directories running under different usernames, different user accounts, or on totally separate servers even. What I've seen time and time again is someone who gets a hosting plan that allows for unlimited sites, and each site is a subdirectory of their home folder when they log into their account. And what you get is, if any one of those sites gets hacked, then that hack can jump to the other sites because they're all in the same user account on the server. And so you want to keep those isolated so that when one site gets hacked, everything else is still secure. You can do checksum validations. So using a WP-CLI, which is a command line tool used to manage WordPress, you can run these commands that will compare the code running on your server against the code on WordPress.org for that version of Core or for those plugins that you're running. And it will tell you if any files have been changed. This is a great tool for remediating your site when it's been hacked, for seeing what's been changed. And then I want to talk a little bit about the developer's perspective for security. But first, I'll just check if there's any questions about the server administrator side of things.
Did you see Emily's question in the chat, which is spam?
Nope.
Spam and forms, are those comments with links, bad links to keep sitting? I'm sorry. Are those comments with links bad to keep sitting around in your database, or only dangerous if you've clicked them?
So on spam coming in on comments. So Yeah, they're not bad to have in your database. Just being there is not going to do anything. It's going to those websites that you don't want to do, and you don't want to display those links to your users either. I do recommend cleaning up those comments. I personally delete them, at least the ones that don't make it through the spam filter. I use Akismet, the plugin that does the spam filtering, and so that gets rid of most of the spam. And if there's anything else, I do delete it just because I don't want to see that information on my screen. It does technically take up space in your database as well. I like to keep things tidy.
How about things that you get through your form, through your contact form? Same thing, same idea.
Same thing. If you're getting spam form comments, I'd delete
Mhm.
those as well.
Yep.
You know, you're not going to go back and reference them. They're not, they're not providing you any value.
Right.
So I'd delete those.
Thanks.
They're not dangerous per se, is that correct?
No, they're not dangerous at all. Again, click on the link, different story, but just being there is not a problem.
Because I just never touched mine.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I wasn't doing anything wrong.
So looking on the developer side, one of the things you want to do is sanitization and validation of your code. So there are all sorts of functions here built into WordPress that help do this. The goal of sanitization and validation is to make sure that the data that is coming into WordPress is in or out of WordPress is one, the data that's expected, and that it's in the format that's expected. So looking at something like this, if I have a plugin that's accepting a quantity value, I am running PHP code here that makes sure that the quantity is a number so that you can't pass ABC as quantity. It's making sure that the number is positive so that I can't order a negative number of things and try and get a refund. And it's making sure that the quantity is within a certain range that is specified. So if I run my code through, if I run my quantity field through all of this validation, I know then that the number coming out is within a range that it's going to be the data that I was expecting it to be. Escape, so that was data coming in. Data on the way out, you escape. So you want to make sure that you're not going to execute code in the browser that would display anything other than you intended. Especially things like you don't want to run JavaScript on the client's end because you typed some JavaScript into your blog post. You don't want that to actually run on their page. So escaping HTML will add the HTML required to actually show the word script instead of executing the script tag or something like that, right? There's an example of escaping HTML here. We're echoing escape HTML with a string, and we know that that string now will be safely displayed in the user's browser. There's variations on this for attributes as well. So escaping it has to be between those double quotes on a HTML attribute. The WP KSES function, KSES, specifies that when displaying HTML, it can only display a certain set of HTML elements or attributes. So you could have a database entry that has all sorts of HTML, and in this definition of WP KSES, it would only actually print out the HTML for anchor tags with the href and title elements. It would drop other elements inside the anchors. It would allow the line break, the emphasis, and the strong tags, but nothing else. Everything else would get stripped out of that code. So a really useful function for limiting what HTML is allowed to be displayed. There's a WP-rel no follow command, which would go through that HTML, find every link, and add a rel equals no follow attribute to it. Rel equals no follow is a way to tell search engines not to go and follow to that next link. It's not giving any link juice, as it were, for search engines between those pages. If you want to learn more about centralization and escaping, there's lots of documentation about it on the WordPress developer website. There's a section on data validation, another one on sanitization, and another one on escaping that you can find at these URLs. When you're working with the WordPress database, so if you're directly running queries against MySQL, if you're doing custom code, use the WP-DB library, that class that has all the functions that you need to safely interact with the database and not open yourself up to things like SQL injection attacks, where a hacker could use misformed code to be able to extract data from your database or change data in your database. So an example of WP-DB, this is a statement that would insert a new row into the table name, table underscore name, and it would set these column values, value 1 and 1, 2, 3 for columns 1 and 2. So when you run this, WordPress will turn this into an insert statement in the database that is properly formatted. Same thing with updating. Here you're specifying you want to update this table. You want to set these values. And you want to set them where the ID column equals 1. So this will only be updating one row in this table. It's the row where ID equals 1 with these values. And it would turn that into a safe SQL statement.
Quick question on that one there.
Yeah.
Is WPD better than prepared statements or is it available in generic PHP coding, or do you have to put everything into the functions.php file?
WP-DB is available anywhere as long as WordPress is running. So if you're doing a custom plugin, it's there. It's available in themes. But it is not basic PHP. That is a WordPress specific ORM. The difference between it, prepared statements. So the prepare function itself is actually a function of WP-DB. So in this example, safe SQL WP-DB arrow prepare, and then a SQL statement with parameters on it. So this is part of that WP-DB library.
So they're interchangeable.
Yeah, I think the idea is
it's less easy to accidentally make a mistake with the the update and insert statements and that kind of stuff. I just lost my headphones.
Didn't mean to break the call.
Okay. No. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. My battery's died. So yeah, it's just this is potentially the better way to do it. I suspect there are other optimizations and things like that done in the background on some of these statements that would make better use of caching or things like that. But if you do need to write your own, there's nothing wrong with WP-DB prepare. The thing you just don't want to be doing is executing raw SQL that has parameters in it that hasn't been run through a function like this.
Correct, I understand that. I've always used PDO for the masses of SQLs which I've written for clients. So just wondering, I've tried using WPDB raw in PHP and it's just failed miserably.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean PDO as well. As long as you're running prepared statements, you should be okay.
Okay.
Next item is WordPress coding standards. So this isn't directly a security thing. It's a code style thing and a code format thing. So WordPress does have standards for PHP, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for how they think code should look and how you name things, how you indent things. All the very picky, here's how we write code documentation. The good thing about choosing a coding standard and going with it is that when you're reviewing code, it becomes a lot easier to spot things that are wrong because you have a much clearer understanding of what it is you're looking at when things follow what you expect them to be. So I encourage you, if you are writing code, to, and especially if it's going to be code that you're going to share in the WordPress world, that you look at adopting the WordPress coding standard to help others out who may be looking at this code. And finally, I wanted to look at it from an IT security professional's perspective. So, if you're running your, if you're managing your website, or if you're running your company's IT security program, what are your responsibilities when it comes to having a WordPress website? And really, this comes down to responsible disclosure. If you think you've found a security bug, the best thing you can do is to reach out to the authors of the vulnerable code and give them a chance to address the security issue before that bug is made widely known in public. We work in an environment of open source code. If as soon as you start talking about a security bug that's out there, hackers have access to the source code of those plugins or of WordPress core or themes because they're open source by nature. So it allows them to confirm that there is a bug there and start developing methods of attacking this vulnerability without there being a fix available yet from the authors. So you want to give the code authors a chance to confirm and fix any security issues, ideally before they're being discussed openly in public. A lot of plugin authors will have a lot of companies will have a way of contacting them regarding security issues specifically. It might be a separate email address, a separate online form, something that goes directly to their security team. If your website is hosted on WordPress.com, they participate in something called HackerOne. It's a platform for, which is a platform for reporting security vulnerabilities. And through bug bounty programs like this, hackers are paid, as a thank you for finding security issues in software. So if you're on WordPress.com, Automatic has a bug bounty program. If you think you found an issue in the main WordPress core code of the open source product, there's a separate bug bounty program just for WordPress, and a couple of the related tools like WP-CLI, BuddyPress, a few things are included in that bug bounty program as well. WordFence has a bug bounty program that they run. So if you find a bug, or not a bug, but a security issue in any theme or plugin with at least 50,000 installs, you'd be eligible in that bug bounty as well. In general, for WordPress plugins, you can send an email to plugins@wordpress.org, and they will try and, if there's a security issue there and they can't get hold of the author either, they'll take the plugin down. So it can be good to contact them if there's a serious security issue. That's the big thing is, don't go writing up a blog post saying, hey, I found this security bug without telling the author first. That's, that's the whole thing of responsible disclosure that I just wanted to end things off with tonight. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah.
So earlier, I keep saying earlier this year, and it's a new year now. Last year, a rather large site that I work on was suddenly under a DOS attack.
Yeah.
And the way I knew it was under a DOS attack is that our Twitter DM, we got a Twitter DM saying that they saw that we were under a DOS attack. Of course they did, because they caused it. And they will very happily solve the problem for us for 5,000 in Bitcoin.
Right.
So I just blocked them and then started to work with the hosting company. Then, because my name is also associated with that other site and that other project, I started getting DMs in my personal Twitter account at the time saying, why did you block us? we can fix this or make life difficult for you. And I just said, thank you for letting me know the kind of person you are. I'm already fixing it. Have a good day. And was able to work with Pagely and get it. Like, they basically were able to fix it within an hour. They just upped the permissions until the attack was done, and then restored our account to the level that it should have been at. And we haven't had an issue since then. But I say that to say, don't panic and don't pay people who are hijacking or ransoming your site, because you have other options. A quick call or ticket, I shouldn't call, who has calls anymore, but an open ticket with your hosting company can probably go a long way to helping out with those kinds of issues. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there too, because there's nothing you can do really about a DOS attack on your site. You can't, you've already hardened it, you've done all the things, and they're just going to keep throwing traffic at you until you crumble, which your hosting company doesn't want to see that either. So they're willing to work with you almost. I can't imagine any hosting company not willing to work with you to solve that issue. But when they see that you're too tough a nut to crack, they're going to move on to somebody else. So stick to your guns.
Great point. And that reminds me of kind of a related thing, is that there's the self-DDoSing. If you know that your website is going to be featured on, the evening news, or you have a major event that's going to be drawing, 100 times your regular traffic to your website, reach out to your web host, let them know, especially if it's a managed host, and say, hey, I'm going to be on Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, what can I do? And your web host will work with you to upgrade you maybe to a better plan for a month, or, to be monitoring your website to make sure that it doesn't go down, or they'll do some additional configuration to make sure that, it can handle the traffic. I've heard time and time again from web hosts that go, we could have helped that client whose website crashed on national TV if they had have just told us.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like when you travel out of the country, you want to let your bank know you're going to use your debit card. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's there are solutions to this, but if you don't, when websites go down, when they're featured on TV and stuff like that, it's a denial of service. It's not necessarily an attack, but it's the exact same result. You don't have that availability of your website now in the CIA triad.
But that time you did it to yourself as opposed to nefarious people trying to do it to you.
Yes. Yeah, so your customer's doing it, and then that's a really bad thing. Because
a very bad customer experience.
Yeah.
For sure. Questions for Shawn. Does anybody else have security questions? Guess everybody's secure. Mary, this was your topic. Did you have other ideas or things you wanted to talk about? Other questions?
No, this was great. I really enjoyed the overview, and I appreciate it, but nothing comes to mind at the moment.
Okay, cool. How about you, Jim? I haven't seen your face all year. You're muted though. No, you're still muted.
Hang on, I'm trying to find a message.
Gotcha,
that
gotcha. You had a question though, Jim? We're just holding. Okay.
Oh, no, go on to somebody else.
Okay. Who haven't we heard from? Quasi. I said it wrong that time. Quasi, do you have any questions? You're new to our group. We'll put you right in the hot seat.
No, thank you. No questions. That
Okay.
was a lot of useful, a lot of new information
Good.
for me, especially when you started getting into, what was it, the sanitation, and at the end, I'm sorry, I wrote notes. Hold on here. I took screenshots, and the exit, what was it? Something, the exit code and stuff like that. I was just like, what? But no, I'm really glad that I got exposed to all that, because I never would have ever thought about that, other than the first part of your presentation, like the basic, security parts. But yeah, no, thank you for all that.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for being here. So some of the, I was being distracted by a bunch of messages, but come right back to you, Jim. I wanted to say, did you talk at all about, and I don't think I heard it, but did you talk at all about how the quality of your hosting can affect your security?
I didn't.
Maybe just a quick word on that.
So yeah, I mean, it kind of goes in with that thing where I say, don't stick all your sites in the same user account on your host, because it'll, cause problems across the sites if a site is hacked. But the same thing goes for, paying for a $5 a month hosting plan, and then wondering why your site is really slow, why you're not getting good performance out of the site, or why it doesn't handle traffic well. There's more than 10 users hitting it. What you run into with things like shared hosting plans like that is that the web host is cramming a whole pile of different customers onto the same server, and you're all splitting the cost, well, plus their profits of hosting you. But what happens if one of the other customers on that server gets a whole pile of traffic? Your site's going to be impacted, because there's only so much CPU, only so much RAM available, only so much network pipe coming out of that server. So you want to make sure that your resources really have, your site has enough resources to be able to run properly. And you usually only get that, by paying for what you need, which is, the slightly more expensive plans.
Yep.
What I've always said, especially to business owners, who are like, yeah, but I can get this hosting over here for, $5. And I point out that their phone bill is many times what that number is. Yet their business actually comes in more through their website than it does by phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to think about, what that spend actually represents. It's your primary marketing method to the world. So it's worth paying a little bit more for it.
Yeah. Jim, and then Emily.
Yeah, but you have to understand, I am not technical at all. But I successfully have put up a few sites. I get this message. I have no idea what these are, and from one of my sites, what's a DMARC report, and is this something I need to be concerned about, or is this something I can just delete? I don't know what they are.
So DMARC is one of a couple of protocols aimed at reducing mail spam. So DMARC, SPF records, and there's a third one I can't recall right now, are kind of three standards that all work together to try and prove the email being sent is being sent from who it says it is. And so, yeah, I would try, if you're running your own domains email, I would try and get your DMARC set up properly. Because a lot more companies out there are really trying to aggressively spam block. And you want to make sure that any email coming out from your WordPress site or from your email is going to make it through their filters, and checking if there's valid DMARC headers and valid SPF headers and things like that is becoming the standard way to do that.
Okay, because I have many emails and I have email addresses out of 3 of my sites, and I only get this for one of the sites. So I'm assuming what you're saying is I've worked with the host, the DMARC is set up properly for the other 2 sites, but I should have contact them to help them, have them help me tweak whatever I got to do for this site.
Exactly. And I believe I just saw something recently too. I think Yahoo and one other company, they're about to change their rule, because of Google, that are about to require that this, DMARC be set up and everything. So I know HubSpot, MailChimp, I think both have sent out campaigns going like, make sure you have this set up right, or your deliverability is going to drop. It's at the phase now of the warnings of, get this done, because we are going to turn on the requirement for it.
Yeah, it starts February for Gmail. Both of them require DMARC.
Okay.
Which basically text records that authenticates your email, like Shawn was saying. But yeah, if you don't have DMARC, some of your email will stop going through. And I posted a link to the Google article, and there's others out there.
Perfect.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Emily.
Thanks.
I just wanted to confirm that. So I have an older freelance plan with Flywheel. So would that still be considered like everything's in one account kind of deal? And it's just like that for all those unlimited hosting plans, or?
I don't know about Flywheel specifically. I suspect they may have set things up properly. But when you FTP into your account, do you see like a list of all your domains, or do you have a separate FTP username and password for each site?
It's a single account user and password.
So it could be vulnerable to that type of
Okay.
cross account contamination that I was talking about.
But I should be able to just talk to them and ask them that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Well, I've got one comment question generically, Shawn, that goes through. I always have the habit, every time I set up a new client, is talking with my hosting provider, because I'm an ISP and I've got managed services and shared colo site, is to ensure that their DR recovery plans are adequate, and how often they test and audit their site, the actual hosted company shares, has that detail available to everybody. Because if they have not got an appropriate DR backup recovery plan in place, and the small businesses are way down the food chain in respect of a major disaster, you could be down days without knowing it.
Yeah, for sure. The more critical it is that your website stay online, the more you want to be vetting who you're hosting that site with, and what procedures you have in place for when something goes wrong. If there's a This happened to a hosting company, I think it was in Montreal a year or two ago, that there was a huge power outage. And that's when they found out that the generator was broken too. And so everything was just, and so what do you do in that case? You know, your web host is telling you it's going to be 48 hours until things are back online, or that gives you, like, that's a big enough window that you can move the website and have it back online somewhere else if you had a very recent backup, where you could be restoring the website faster than your host by moving it. So yeah, what you do in disaster recovery really depends on your appetite for risk and how much spend you want to have in terms of having always on backups available or things like that, right?
Yeah, because I'm just going through a failover test with one of my clients right now. We just failed over during the course of this call to the hosted domains over in California from Florida.
Yeah.
Right. So anybody that's got an ideal with small businesses that don't have the funds for major clients, right, that have got hundreds of thousands of dollars in IT spend. These are small companies, but back to your point, a $5 domain doesn't give you what this $100 a month domain should give you.
Exactly. That's
right.
You're paying for very different services at that point.
Yeah, but backup's not that expensive, really. You can have triple redundancy for fairly cheap. Like Backdraft Plus and WP Vivid, they have the free versions. I mean, the Pro's definitely better, but any kind of decent hosting, you can back up locally, back up on your server, and then you get some kind of remote cloud backup, triple redundancy. Not very expensive. Most of that's actually free.
True, but then you don't necessarily have a site to recover to. If your primary site's gone down without a DR plan and the mechanisms for that hosted, managed by the providers.
A completely backup hosting service?
I provide that as part of my ISP services, yes.
Okay, yeah, that's a little different animal. Excuse me, I was thinking of just the backing up your website. But if you're backing up your hosting services, yeah, that might run a little bit more.
Yeah,
because you're saying, hey, if I'm using WP Engine, but I'm going to have Kinsta running in the background just in case it goes down. I mean, that's definitely a level of
two accounts. Yeah.
Yeah. But
okay.
Anyway, hey, I wanted to clarify on the email DMARC. Most of the requirements are for larger companies that are bulk sending, but the thresholds are dropping. But they're trying to push everybody to use DMARC because it cuts down on the spam and that phishing and that all that scamming that's going on. So your email, if you're just doing personal Gmail or you got a personal Yahoo account, your emails will probably go through fine in February, but they are pushing everybody to use DMARC. DMARC, DKIP, and SFP records, I think is what the three. So
thanks.
Yeah. And the other thing just to mention on that with DMARC, I'm not fully aware of that, I haven't read into it, but I have over the last 18 months had problems with I think it was one of you guys was saying that Jim email is getting blocked, not getting in and out. And after doing a lot of research and finding, I discovered predominantly Microsoft and Google that own blocks of IP addresses will randomly pick large blocks that they will shut down for 48 hours. And if you get caught in that, you're just totally screwed.
That's not fun.
No. And the only way you find it is you get a little message saying that, email was not delivered due to X and it's been stopped. And you spend hours chasing it down, right? Reading headers and testing and tracking and find out that Microsoft has blocked or Google has blocked their IP ranges. It's typically in the 10.x to the 20.x range that gets shut down randomly, blocks if they pick.
I'm going to stop the recording here.